The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.
Episode 28, Silly Goose Gang Podcast. And unbelievably, incredibly, joining us this evening, Kelly Pavlik, former WBC, WBO, Ring Magazine and Lineal Middleweight Champion of the world. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's
a nice little list of titles I got there, huh?
It's probably the coolest list I've had.
Not a bad career, Kelly.
Yeah.
Not a bad career. I have to, right from the set and the get-go, Kelly, I have to ask you, it's one of the things that I always wanted to ask you if I ever got a chance to meet you, is how the hell did you get through the second round against Jermaine Taylor?
A lot of hard work, man. It was, there was actually a lot that went into that. Smoger, the referee, talking with him, and he made it clear what you need to do. I hear a lot of people say, like, if that was any other referee, they would have stopped the fight. But in all reality, I was grabbing, holding on, and punching to the body back. I guess how I survived was it took me 7 years to get that shot, to get that title shot. And I wasn't going to let it go by that easy. And especially I knew I could win that fight. The first round, I won. I was winning that second round up to the point of getting caught in the back of the air. And so it was just the determination, just all the years of hard work and everything else. So.
Yeah, it was. You seen? It's, I don't know if people haven't watched that fight. That's one of the great middleweight fights. I watched it this morning again just to remind myself. You see, you sort of dropped your hands a little bit and you got caught, but you seen you clamping, you clamped on. You seen you were still, you were all there.
Even the time when I fell off balance and I was kind of running across the ring.
Yeah.
You watch, I mean, he really didn't land no shot. I turned right back around. I kind of hooked him under the arm and pulled him in. So, as Smoger said, as long as you show me that you know what's going on, that you're reactive by grabbing or anything like that, he goes, I won't stop the fight. And that's with any referee. And when I grabbed him and hooked him up like that, to be able to do that, you had to have your whereabouts.
Yeah.
You had to be there, somewhat mentally. It was definitely an equilibrium shot. So with that being said, I knew everything that was going on. It just takes the legs out from you. And, that was the big part of that round.
Yeah. It was I suppose, from what I could see, that was obviously, outstanding conditioning. You were obviously in outrageous shape to come back, because you came back by the end of the round, you were throwing shots again and coming along nicely again. So I'm assuming because you're you're enormous at 160 pounds. I would have, must have been in shape pretty much 12 months of the year just to keep yourself down.
Yeah, we did. I trained really hard during my camps. I had 2-month training camps. I trained 6-7 hours a day, so it was hardcore. In between fights, I took about 2 weeks off, 2.5 weeks, depending on when the next fight was scheduled, because you had to give the body a break too, especially.
Yeah.
Now I'm not one of them guys that are trying to pat myself on the back, but I don't think there was many out there that trained like I did. Like I said, 6-7 hours a day. That's a long day, and it was hard training. That fight to be able to show that I could do that in the second round, and then be able to come.
Oh, I've just lost connection. Back in. Slight technical hitch. We'll keep recording, guys, just while we try and add Kelly back in there. Just one of those things, unfortunately, when you're recording live, that people sometimes
happened before.
We there?
I
end up getting the beep.
That's okay.
All right, we're back.
It's fine.
So as I was saying, that second round, I came back and I showed what type of condition I was in. That was huge. Don't get me wrong, but I think the biggest key part of that fight too, where it really sucked the soul and energy out of Jermaine, was that third round. I came back the very next round and I threw 99 punches. So my punch rate in all my fights were pretty big. You know what I mean? I averaged, they say like high 80s, but I think it was like mid 90s, punches per round. That's pretty high for middleweight in all-time history of champs. But so that was the big part. I always went into fights. I knew I had power. My boxing, I believe, was underrated, but that's for another time. But my conditioning was a big factor too. I mean, I threw a lot of punches. So going into a fight, I knew I was in shape,
Yeah. One thing that I would say, just from go back and, I watched a few fights today again. And like you were saying, your boxing, the skill set was way better even than I remembered, because I remembered, so I got into amateur boxing late, around about 2007, when you were, on your tear through the middleweight division. So I was one of the first people I was introduced to when I started boxing was Kelly Pavlik. So I watched, was it Buddy McCart, those guys, and Edison Miranda, these guys. So I watched you coming through. So I was, I remembered you even now as being a massive puncher, but watching just Jermaine Taylor, you were coming down with the right hand a lot and then coming up with the left hook, either body or head. So I was reminded, you had way better ability than what I remembered.
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of, I hate using the term casual, but a lot of people that don't really know too much of boxing, they say, he was slow or this, he wasn't a good boxer, but to be able to knock out elite guys at the top, like Miranda's and Jermaine Taylor's, and stop veterans like Bronco McCart, you have to be fast enough to hit them. You have to be smart enough and technical enough to hit them, right? Especially with a clean shot to knock them out or stop them. So that just goes to show, sometimes when people say things, it's a little crazy.
Yeah, it's I think people, looking back now, maybe forget, how good Edison Miranda, was at the time. Edison Miranda was a scary man at the time when you boxed him, a real scary guy.
Yeah, he was the monster of the division at the time.
I think one thing that's when after you beat Edison and then you beat Jermaine the first time, it was like you perhaps took quite a bit out of them, because after that their careers went off like that. Quite a lot of punishment to those guys. And Jermaine, lost to Arthur Abraham again after that, and then Carl Froch, and he got knocked out quite badly a few times. But it was like, the first fight with you really, took a lot out of him. He was taking a lot of right hands.
It did, and sometimes when you take a beating like that, it could, But the only thing I give Jermaine credit, and this is why, and it's not because I beat him. I'm sure a lot of people would think like I'm very realistic, first of all. So on a lot of things that there's been a lot of topics on my podcast fight page on Facebook about just in general your all-time greats and compared to today's fighters. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to understand it, but reality is reality. But even going into about Jermaine, I'm not saying this to pad me up, but Jermaine took a lot of shit for the guys that he fought before me and how he looked. And people shouldn't forget, that, they were a little smaller. They were a weight class lower, but Winky Wright, an all-time great. He's a Hall of Famer. Winky Wright could be 75 years old and he's going to make you look bad with his style. Kasim Uma, an awkward, all over the place, who throws 90 punches around. Awkward fighter, and Jermaine beat them. And then after that, he got knocked out by Froch, but he was whooping Froch's ass in that fight. In my opinion, he could have took another knee in that last round, and he would have survived. And I still had him far enough up on points that he would have won. He was beating the shit out of Arthur Abraham. It wasn't even a fight until he got caught in the last round. So with those, I mean, he still beat Jeff Lacey. I think he won.
Yeah.
Jermaine won another world title at super middleweight, or maybe it was Sam Solomon.
Sam Solomon, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, but was he the same fighter after me? No. I don't think he was. I think that not so much. It may not have been from the damage. It just may have been, in the heart.
Yeah.
Some guys, they're not in it for the long term, and they just kind of get over the sport. It is, but I thought Jermaine was a fantastic fighter.
It's also worth saying that all those fights that you just mentioned, Kelly, were all at 168 as well. He moved up a weight as well. So he was a great fighter. Yeah. And at that time, he was the man who had beaten the man, and you knocked him out.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's if you look at some of the guys, you boxed. I mean, how many guys would you say that you boxed, Kelly, that were great? Because I would say, Martinez, Hopkins, and Jermaine Taylor were three. I mean, really all time great middleweights.
Yeah, Miranda could have been. I mean, Miranda beat some guys. Well, first of all, I thought Miranda beat Abraham, broke his jaw in 3 different places. If that fight's not where it was at, Edison Miranda now beat Abraham and Alan Green. Alan Green was a good fighter when Miranda beat him. But it's great. I thought people soon forget. When you have a name, it seems like if that name's trendy at the time, everything's cool, right?
Yeah.
So I'll break down another little one. Again, this is being realistic. This ain't trying to pad me up. But Lemieux, what's his first name?
David Lemieux.
David Lemieux.
Yeah.
He fought Triple
Rubio.
G.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say Rubio
too, but this is where I'm going. If he goes in to fight Triple G, because Triple G is like the Miranda of 2007, and Triple G is the monster, and all of a sudden, Lemieux is still like he's relevant. He's good, and he's a test. And when Abraham beats him, oh my God, look how good Abraham is. And Abraham is good, but people soon to forget that the guy that I demolished, in Rubio, I think it was 3 or 4 years after the fact, or maybe 5 years after I fought Rubio, goes in and knocks him out when he's 25-0 with 25 knockouts. And then nothing said at that point about it. And Rubio went on to win the world titles, which marks another world champion that I fought and beat. I mean, it's kind of crazy, and I'm just. Sometimes I sit back and it is what it is,
So what what I meant, Kelly, was and what you were saying about all-time greats. I would say that you fought 3 all-time great middleweights. Sorry, if you just in terms of if somebody wants that, because 160 pound is one of the classic divisions, and those are 3 guys. If you were talking about all-time greats, you would say
if you're talking about recognized, absolutely. There was 3, and it was Martinez, Hopkins, and Jermaine Taylor.
I mean, what would you who would, if you had, in terms of fantasy fights, because everybody, all boxing fans like to say these fantasy fights, even though they're not realistic, who would be your picks for middleweight?
Man.
Now,
a fight with Hopkins at middleweight would have been one.
Yeah.
There has been names like Gerald McKellen and guys like that. And I'm like, man, what are you guys trying to do? Get me killed? They have me get big power punchers. But I think I would say a guy like the Abrahams, because I really wanted to unify the division. Here's another one I'll bring up to you guys, and maybe one time on your show you could have this as a topic. I wanted to be undisputed middleweight champion. And in politics, though, in boxing, a lot of times why it's rare to see an undisputed middleweight champion is because, let's be honest, sanction fees and all that on paying on those belts. But my understanding with the undisputed middleweight champion is this, though. I always thought that in order to not be undisputed middleweight champion, is that you had to lose a fight. So with Jermaine, he never lost his titles due to a fight. He lost them due to being stripped or vacated of. And he was the undisputed middleweight champion who beat the man. So, but even if they vacated, he didn't lose that name, that tag. He didn't lose that due to losing a fight. And then the only fight he lost was to me.
Yeah.
So, if somebody out there that really knows the breakdown of it, I feel like, maybe I could have been undisputed middleweight champion because, again, I thought that you had to lose that name by losing the fight in a title fight. Again, I don't know all the truth behind that or how that works, but, that's just another interesting topic for another day, though. So,
yeah.
I suppose that's part of the problem, isn't it? When you've got so many different sanctioning bodies, so many people with their fingers in the pie wanting their cut of the purse, it's sometimes difficult to get them all to agree and get everyone in the ring at one.
that too.
It's tight for everybody.
Yeah, the politics of it, 4 belts. I mean, 4 belts. That was the argument. People think that they should go back to like 1 or 2 belts.
No,
and that's impossible because you really have people bitching.
Yeah.
Think about it. We see now in these weight classes, just say like lightweight, you got Haney, Lomachenko, Teofimo. My God, come on, there's a bunch more.
There's
6 guys.
Ryan Garcia, Luke Campbell. A lot of really good guys.
6 guys that's right in that mix right now. That's like phenomenal fighters. You only have 1 belt. How you're not going to be able to see them guys, and nobody's going to get that fight within their prime either.
Yeah.
If you have only 2 belts, nobody's going to be able to see that matchup within this prime. With the 4, it's almost like how they changed the college football, which I like. Now you got the 4 weight thing, so now you're getting the best of the best versus the best versus the best, and then you push for the top 2 to fight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the way it should be, but. There's politics, and there's always been politics in boxing, but I still think to this day that you're still getting some of the best guys, that are fighting together.
I've always thought that as well, Kelly. If you go back to 20s, 30s, 40s, when there was the world champion, there was so many really good guys that never got a shot at a title, and it was really unfortunate for those guys. But is it frustrating for you? If the cards had fell a different way, you could have been undisputed middleweight champion. To see other guys, I'm just thinking like an Adrian Broner who just moved up and down weights and got world titles, really quite easily. Is that frustrating?
No, I give them guys credit. Listen, we got to be honest. When you're able to move to a different weight class and win a world title, that's tough because moving up in weight, it's a different ball game, especially at an elite level. You're talking about fighting guys that are lighter, and now you're moving up to guys. Okay, so you fight at 147, or just say 140, junior welterweight, junior welterweight, super lightweight, whichever organization. Now you're fighting a guy who's coming down from 150, 153. And you guys are both on the same playing field, night of weigh-in. You go fight him, but you're used to that weight class. Now, next fight, you move up to go fight an elite guy at that weight class who's coming down from 163, 164, who's a naturally bigger guy. So, I tip my hat. I mean, I wish behind me that I would have moved up to 68 earlier instead of like towards the end of my career because there was a lot of big fights, even that Super 6 tournament. That would have been cool. But no, I don't knock them guys for that. I think that when you're able to go in there, take, for instance, like a Mikey Garcia, a Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, what them guys were able to do, and those, all the 3 to 4 different weight classes, that says a lot. I mean, that's an elite fighter. It is. Yeah.
Just because you were talking about weight there, Kelly. When you fought Bernard, was that 170 pounds?
I think if I could recall right, it was a couple pounds under a light heavyweight.
Right, okay.
72. I want to say 172. Might have been 170.
Was
I
that
think it was more so.
did that weight, did the extra 10 pounds or anything, did that have an effect on you in that fight, or
No. I don't hop on it much because we know when you throw shit out there, you get slammed for it. You know what I mean? And especially all these years later now. I mean, I've been retired 8 years.
Yeah,
And that fight was 12 years ago.
yeah,
It was not me that night, and it is documented. As far as even the commission has all the stuff. It was just not me that night. We had this situation, and Bernard Hopkins. My God, I mean, you're talking about bad luck. I mean, you're fighting a guy, one of the greatest of all time.
yeah.
Just it was an off night, and people say that it ruined my career. Again, I came back and dominated a good fighter in Rubio, but so it was hard to take away from that fight because I knew it wasn't me that night. And let's say, and I know styles make fights. Here's another good one too on that, just to go to show the case of it. Styles make fights. I absolutely agree with that. Okay, but not the way that how I took care of Jermaine Taylor and how the Hopkins fight turned out. It's not that big of a difference, though. You get what I mean? Styles make fights does not play that big of a role in that situation. So that goes to show that something was not me that night. Yes, could Bernard have beaten me? Yeah, absolutely. But it wouldn't have been a landslide like it was. I mean, he whooped my ass in that fight. So
I think as a measure of that fight, and if memory serves me right, Bernard fought Joe Calzaghe after that. I believe Bernard fought Joe after that. I think December 2008. I think would have been about the time for that. I think that's right. But people over here in the UK were saying, well, if Joe Calzaghe had beaten you, Joe Calzaghe probably could have said that he was pound for pound number one at the time. So although you're saying you lost, a landslide decision, but that was the level that it was at. That was at the very top level of the sport. And if people here said, if Joe had done that, Joe would have been probably pound for pound number one. So. And Bernard went on after that to beat he beat Babych Shumanov when he was like 48 years old for the IBA and WBA. You go, Jesus, how does that? The guy's incredible. So it's one of those defeats that as it goes on looks better. And even was there any problem losing the weight again, Kelly, to come back to to come down?
No, surprisingly, it was weird. It's weird with weight. I mean, when I fought Bronco McCart was a struggle, but we made it. And then the next fight, it wasn't. So when you're talking 6'2", and as you're getting older, your mid-20s and later 20s, it fluctuates, and some are harder than others. And actually, Rubio wasn't that bad to come back down. And obviously, and I know that it sounds so... I'm making so many excuses, but the real bad time was Sergio Martinez. I mean, it was horrific. And again, with that fight, you had HBO, so documented. And I say this because that is documented. HBO, they talked about it during the fight. How hard it was. They mentioned about the treadmill and stationary bike in my hotel room, and all that. So, and that was it with that fight. Martinez, though, another fantastic fighter, another Hall of Famer, and to go in there. And that was a great fight. The early rounds, I gave him a couple of the early rounds. As the middle of the fight wore on, I was really controlling it. I mean, I had the middle rounds mine. And then I got to 10-8. And going into that round, the ninth round, when I got cut, which had nothing to do with the fight, I was up on the scorecard. So, that's only 3 or 4 rounds before the end of the fight. And I just hit the wall in that ninth round. I wasn't tired cardio. Like, my wind was good. It was more just depleted, from everything. And then that was what was tough about it. And I was surprised I did as well as I did in the middle rounds. But again, taking nothing away from Sergio Martinez. Sergio Martinez was an amazing fighter.
He's got such a a strange style, because obviously he's southpaw, his hands are always down, and he just the way he almost looks square when he throws shots. It's bizarre. He just pop shots out
from all different angles. But what's even worse about that is they're all from different angles, but they're so fast too. You know what I mean? So you got to try to be as quick or be a part of it. And I thought that we cut that down very nice in the middle round. You know what I mean? Like it was actually, I thought a fantastic job of stopping that. But again, there was only so much I could do at that point.
Just while we're talking weights here, Kelly, how kind of an average camp, how much would you be cutting during your camp to get down to fighting weight?
Really, again, I kept myself right around the low 70s, like 173. Okay. But let's be honest, 173, that's 13 pounds. 173 for a 6'2", 27-year-old, 28-year-old. Most people see that if you didn't know he was a pro boxer, you think he has an eating disorder. You know what I mean? So that's very thin. That's
no. I mean, I'm just to put that in perspective, I'm 6'2" and about 195, so I totally appreciate that.
You're thin.
No, but 195, that's 190. That's 22 pounds heavier than what I was. I mean, that's still that's a good. Actually, 6'2", 190 on chart is healthy. That's what you're supposed to be for, that height. And for me to get down to 160. So even though I was only at 173, I get down to 165, 64, 63. That was cool. It got a little tough getting from like the last 5 pounds, but the last 2 to 3 was the hard part.
Yeah.
And, to this day, I think about with the Martinez fight, I knew that was going into that fight. I knew that was my last fight at middleweight. I knew it. So I do. That's the one thing in my career where I go, if I would have came in at a pound over or 2 pounds and said, you know what, screw it, I'm just coming in a pound or too heavy, what the difference would have been. But I think that when a W in a situation like that hurt me more than a loss. Because people said, oh, well, you came in 2 pounds heavy, this, that. Because for me, what would I have cared if they stripped me? It was my last fight at middleweight. I was moving.
What's always really funny is people who have never had to cut weight, Kelly. I box as an amateur. We both do jiu-jitsu now, so I've done some jiu-jitsu competitions. People don't understand how hard. When you're saying a pound or two, people always go, "Why?" It's hilarious when people say, "How do you miss weight by? How would you miss weight by a pound?" You don't know.
I'll tell you right here. I can easily explain that to that person that never did it. The pound and a half is a difference of being dried out for 2 days and 5 more hours on a stationary bike or a treadmill. Cut out the sauna. Saunas don't work at that point. I was going into the sauna I had nothing to sweat. I was in the sauna for 25 minutes and we stopped because I could have got real sick. You come to a point where you're so depleted, you're not getting no sweat out of somebody. So you got to keep trying to burn calories and calories. 1 pound to a pound and a half at a point of dehydration and being dried out for that many days. That's probably 4 or 5 hours of more work when your body is absolutely firing off of nothing.
Yeah.
You're beyond catabolic state. You know what I mean? You really are.
So if anybody wants to moan about a pound in weight, you've just heard it from the world champion. So shut the fuck up.
When you say, well, how do you miss it by a pound? Go spit in the cup. Listen, it's not like that.
I have seen, a few instances. One that comes to mind was Paul Smith fought Andre Ward, and I think he missed by like 7 pounds. And you go, oh, okay, that's unprofessional. That's unprofessional. But it's a different thing. But so we haven't talked about the amateur days yet, Kelly. But did you fight Jermaine in the amateurs? Is that correct?
I fought him. I was 17. I fought him in Olympic trials. I was just getting settled into the open division, and it was a good fight. He definitely won. He beat me, but it was a good fight, and it was a learning experience for me. Again, I was just a baby going into that, and that's what we said in the countdown to the title during the title fight, because I think Kim and Emmanuel were going off the fact they beat me in the amateurs. But you're talking 25 years old and 17 years old. That's a world of difference, So, and we explained that to them in that countdown, but we showed them on fight night.
Yeah, definitely. Did you, how were the judging decisions in America in the amateur game? Because I've experienced it in Scotland over here, amateur, refereeing decisions and judging decisions. So, did you have the same kind of absolute nonsense judges over there?
No, that you're sore about it, Chris, still, eh?
No, I'm sorry about it.
Not often. I mean, I had some where I thought there were some fights where I definitely thought I won in the amateurs, but I wouldn't say it was that bad or off to call it a robbery. There was one in the Olympic trials. So in Olympic trials, you have a double elimination. That's at least when I was in the 2000. So I lost to Taylor. I came back and won the next night, and then I fought a kid by the name of Anthony Hanshaw, who was one of the top-rated amateurs for years in the USA boxing. And another older, he was 5 years old, 4 or 5 years older than me. And we went into that fight, and I was up 10-7 going into the last round. Now, this is computer points. They go on a point system. And the last round, we went to war. I think I actually buckled him. He didn't get a stand 8 count. And to be said, the final score was 13-7. So they didn't give me 1 point. Not 1 point. And that goes to show now Hanshaw was a guy who I think they were trying, because Hanshaw went back to fight Jermaine Taylor again in the box off. And I think that was because or what was seniority. So what they do, what they say in boxing, I do the quotation, is when you're young, like my age, 17 years old, at that time, they expected me to be around another 4 years. You know what I mean? Especially because I wasn't even in the open division a year, and I made that much noise. So they usually, seniority, I went to usually the older guys, they would get the decisions. And, Jermaine Taylor was obviously one of the top. And I believe that they knew he was going because he beat Hanshaw 22-0. The fight before I fought Hanshaw. And, but, if it wasn't him, if there should have been some type of upset, they would have wanted Hanshaw to go represent. And I do believe that, because, there's no way that you don't give me 1 point in the last round.
Yeah.
So just looking at you for the next Olympic cycle at that point, thinking you're coming back as a 21-year-old, and then you'll get the jump at that point.
Yeah, and that's what they were thinking, but we didn't take that route. So we turned pro. Too many things. With that, what's to say with the politics? I stick around another 4 years for the same thing to happen. You know what I mean? Or get hurt, or so. I mean, I was a young kid. I do think about it. I know I can guarantee that I would have made the Olympic team, 4 years later. But what's to say that something would have happened? So I took the chance. I left when it was right. Plus, I wasn't a big fan of being around in the amateur game too long. I believe, in my opinion, that it could hurt you the longer you're in the amateurs. It could hurt your pro career. That's my opinion. I don't know the facts on it, but
I think
we've seen more good amateurs not pan out in the pros than we've seen good amateurs pan out in the pros.
I mean, I know, I've got friends who were maybe not world-class amateurs, but very good amateurs. And they stay around for too long, and then they turn professional, and they do nothing. And it's they've took all the good work out of themselves in the amateur game.
And I want to tell you this, and a lot of people, especially people who had a very great amateur career, they don't like hearing this, but it is night and day, amateur and pros. It's the whole thing is different. The whole feel of the fight, the whole breakdown of a fight, getting punched, hitting somebody, without a headgear. It's a totally different ball game. Even in 4 3-minute rounds is a lot different than amateur 4 2-minute or 4 3-minute. It's It's a totally different ball game. Do
Yeah.
the amateurs? Do I think seeing some international competition and stuff like that in the amateurs help a little bit for the pros? It might on getting a look at the style, but again, once the bell rings, it's a totally different ball game.
Well, I remember distinctly telling people, Kelly, when Lomachenko, in his second fight, he was fighting Orlando Salido, and everybody was high on Lomachenko, and everybody's saying this guy's amazing, and I was saying, I think at this minute, I think Orlando Salido will beat him. He's just a crafty old Mexican, and he'll stand on his toes, and he'll hit him with elbows, and sure enough, he got a win against them, just knowing all the tricks.
But let's not discredit. Now, this is where a lot of people, and I heard somebody say, anybody can do what Lomachenko did. And I go, well, how come not many has done what Lomachenko's done? I mean, there's a guy right there where people won't give him credit. They won't give him credit for anything. His second pro fight. Now, for years, even Mayweather and Sugar Ray Leonard, your all-time greats. I mean, they came up, I think it was 19, 20 fights into their career before they had a title. And they came up 6, 8, 4, 6, 8, 10. This kid came in his second pro fight and went to 12 rounds. And you hear he had 400 amateur fights. He's pretty much a pro. Bullshit. Totally different. Don't even go on that. That's somebody who never fought pro who would say something like that. And to be able to go in there against a former world champion and a rugged fighter like Salido and to go 12 rounds,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard going from 6 rounds to 8 rounds. It makes a big difference, let alone coming in your second pro fight and fighting 36 minutes.
An incredible fighter. I don't know if you guys ever really watched it in America. Did you ever watch the World Series of Boxing? The semi-professional thing that the guys went into, the IABA back thing. What it was, I think it was 6 rounds, 6 3-minute rounds. So Lomachenko and Usyk and all these guys did that, which is not quite. It's not professional, but it's a little bit more than amateur. But they did do that. But it's incredible. And he beat Josh Taylor handily a couple of times. Our guy, he's actually quite local to us, and Josh is an incredible fighter, and he beat him
phenomenal.
He beat him handily as an amateur, but Josh just came on.
That amateur, so with a guy like Taylor, he can fight. He's athletically gifted because of his amateur background. So that comes into play in the pros as far as hand speed, stuff like that. So when I it's hard for me to explain it coming from a pretty high level in the amateurs to our highest level in pros. Some things, you could judge the fighter a little bit off his amateur background and his speed. If you win a gold medal in the amateur Olympics, you can fucking fight. You know what I mean? You can fight. But when you put that over into a professional game plan and over 10, 12 rounds and over without headgear, the way a fight goes and the way the pace of a fight goes, the biggest thing, momentum in a fight, because you can see guys winning 4 rounds of a fight, and then all of a sudden, this guy just turns it around, and he's winning, and you're over there going, man, I had all this momentum, everything was working, what was working is not working. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of time for shit to happen in a pro fight, and that's what makes the difference. And there's a lot of difference. Once you get hit by some of these guys, there's a big difference.
I know from experience. So I had been in national training camps when Josh was there. So in the national setup, there's levels to it. So I was bottom level. I was okay. I boxed at 91 kilos or heavyweight, 200 pounds, whatever you guys call it. And there's very little competition. So I was in the bottom level. Then there was some good guys, and then there was some really good guys. But then there was Josh Taylor was above it. And even I would watch Josh Taylor and just go, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And then you see the difference between him and Lomachenko, and you see the differences. It's incredible.
But that's what I'm saying. Josh Taylor could fight. I mean,
Yeah,
the kid could fight, and
really good
Lomachenko
fighter.
beat him. But you see that Lomachenko still don't get the credit for that, and it's just one of them things. It's there's a lot of guys. Canelo don't get the credit for everything he's accomplished.
Yeah.
Mayweather to this day, Mayweather don't get probably the greatest fighter of all time, and still to this day don't get the credit that he deserves. It's always he wouldn't have beat this guy from 1942, and he wouldn't.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have beat Joshua Crableg, Shooter Sean. Those are the weird names they had.
Yeah.
So you always hear that, and
Yeah.
that's asinine. As we know, sports science and the evolving athletes, how much better they are today, and people can't
Yeah.
grasp that. They're stuck in
Yeah.
their era, their time.
It's very difficult. So if we go back to sort of near the beginning, Kelly, when people, everybody wants to have these conversations about, who was the greatest of all time and Sugar Ray Robinson and blah, blah. Some people talk about, your division. It's very difficult for me to imagine Harry Greb fighting, 160-pound Roy Jones. How do you can't make that? It's crazy. It's impossible.
So I stumped somebody on my site, and I broke down the records because they started getting into like who fought who, and I said, first of all, I go, did you see Harry Greb fight live, and did you watch all the competition in the 19? Nobody's alive.
Yeah.
That was, if somebody was alive to see Harry Greb fight, they would be 120 years old. Okay, well, if they were old enough to see and realize what was going on. He fought in his 20s. It's 2020. That's 100 years. So, and let's say that at age 15, you could really start noticing what you're watching in a fight. So 115 years old, you would have to be. So cut the shit. You know what I mean? You weren't there. You didn't see the fight. You don't know. You go off what you read. If social media was around in the 1920s, look, I'm going to go actually piss people off. If social media was around in the late 70s, early 80s, when your Fab Four, after winning the world title, was fighting guys 0-1, which they did, 2-3. These guys, Canelo gets torn apart on social media and in the media for jumping up and fighting, jumping up 2 weight classes to beat a guy like Kovalev, and not only beat Kovalev but knock him out, right? And Kovalev shot, he's done. But yet, Roberto Duran can go fight a guy. Roberto Duran's a legend, don't get me wrong. But after winning the world title, he could go fight a guy 0-1. He could fight a guy 25-23. And when you stumped him on that, then it turns into, well, them 25-23 guys weren't your average 25-23. That 0-1 guy wasn't your average 0-1 guy. And then you stump them on that, and then the next one they go to, well, they fought 12 times a year. Eric Greb and Sugar Ray Robinson, these guys fought 20 times a year. Okay, well, does that justify fighting guys 1-4? Because if these guys, first of all, they wouldn't even pass the fights. Not one commission would pass the fight today. These guys get knocked. Can you imagine if Terrence Crawford in his next fight was fighting a guy 2-3?
Yeah.
What would happen?
Yeah.
Fight a guy 25-23. What would happen?
The one of the best examples of that, Kelly, is people like to shit on them, because Floyd Mayweather 50-0, and people would say, but Julio Cesar Chavez went, I think it was like 105-0 without getting beat. But you look at his record and you go, there's a lot of guys in there, like you're saying, that were making their debut, and you go, well, one of the greats, one of the the best Mexican of all time, but he fought some guys in there that he shouldn't have been fighting.
Was Chavez an all-time great, especially in his era? Yeah. But to still knock the newer guys, I'm not going to let anybody knock. I'm going to put a fight up. I'm a fan of the sport of all, and I say for their era because, yes, but we know in sports, sports science, and this is a fact.
Yeah.
Everything in time has gotten better. Your telephones in the 1930s are not like what we got today. Your televisions in the 1950s are not like we got today. And the same thing has happened in sports science and training. And then not only that, how the athletes have evolved. I had this one, and I'm probably going to take shit for it. Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Okay? And you're talking 25 years later. LeBron James is 3 inches taller, 45 to 50 pounds heavier, and is better athletically, more athletically skilled. These guys are getting bigger, faster, stronger, and it is true. And the one guy told me about the difference between the 20s, 30s, and 40s fighters after I stumped him. The only other thing he could resort to was, well, they were more technical. First of all, the guys fought like the Notre Dame Irish mascot. Okay, like a little leprechaun. They got punched in the face for a living. How were they more technical? You're telling me over 60, 70 years, every day of this sport that is evolving, 60, 70 years of studying and breaking down film and everything else, that fighters were more technical back then?
Yeah.
Cut the shit. You know what I mean? It's like saying, Jim Brown would be a great running back today. I love Jim Brown. He was the Cleveland Brown, my favorite team. Jim Brown, being realistic, wouldn't be a third down back today. You know, it's times change, and people have to understand that. Even me, you don't think that for my ego and everything else that I want to be able 30 years from now to say that guy wouldn't even come close to beating me. But in all reality, I know that 30 years from now, these guys are going to be so much more advanced, and I'll be straightforward, and I'll say I wouldn't even win a round. You know what I mean? You just see it. These guys are faster. Look at these young guys. Look how fast they don't get hit. They hit. You know, it's amazing. And I think also you can see, and it's nothing I hate to compare it, but just look at the deaths that you had last year in the sport. It's a serious problem because they're getting stronger. Body, muscle get stronger. Your brain, your skull, that don't get stronger. And you're getting these guys that are just hitting each other at full force, and you're starting to see where it's going. You know what I mean? And it's scary. So look at
the only bit I can't agree with you, Kelly, because I'm a sports science graduate. That's my world. I did sport and sciences at uni. Walter Payton is still the greatest NFL player of all time, and I will fight you to prove that point.
So what's that?
Walter Payton, greatest NFL player of all time. And I will fight you over that. I don't care if you were the Lineal champ. I'll fight you over Walter Payton all day.
What did you said Walter?
The other side of the Atlantic.
Hold on. What's the accent? You said Walter Payton?
Yeah, Chicago Bears. Yeah, number 34.
What? How? No, I got a serious question. How did he die?
One version of either pancreatic cancer or sclerosing something. He died of liver cancer.
What were they saying was one of the big reasons for that?
Potentially steroids. But obviously, Walter Payton, it wasn't steroids.
Hey, I'm just. But I'm not. Hey, people think I'm knocking Walter. No, he was great. And,
no.
And okay, so that's a good point that you brought up. There's another one. Okay, could Walter Payton compete today? Yes. Yeah. Would he have had the numbers that he had?
No.
Probably not. And again, you're now out of all that we're talking from just to take 30 years and back. How many athletes can you really say too? So you're finding those like rare athletes.
Yeah.
You know, needle in a haystack.
We're talking about the elites. It's like you know, I still think, even with everything, you know, Calvin Johnson at Detroit versus Jerry Rice. You know, you still look at Jerry Rice as the greatest.
You guys follow. Sorry to interrupt. You guys follow NBA?
I follow NBA and NFL. Chris Lesso.
No.
Before the shutdown this year, the slam dunk contest.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I hate to say it because I grew up on Michael Jordan. That's my favorite basketball player of all time. I don't think him and Dominic Wilkins slam dunks would have made it past the first round. I mean, these guys are jumping over 7-foot tall guys, bouncing the ball off the backboard, then slam dunking it. It's just so. I don't want to harp on it, but it is true. I mean, it's just. These athletes have evolved, man. It's going to get better and better.
Better training, better nutrition. But just to prove my point, how much I love Walter Payton, this sits beside that.
Ah, Jesus Christ!
and I gave you credit, man. I said that he could probably still compete today.
Oh, And to be honest, the only reason I said I would fight you for it is because I'm on the other side of the Atlantic.
And unfortunately for him, his Russian vitamins ain't like today's Russian vitamins. So
No,
that's
not the same ones. I think it's on the same ones that Lyle Alzado was on.
yeah, right.
I think, I don't understand American football in the slightest, Kelly. I have no idea. I don't know. I like fighting.
Oh, so okay, and you don't know, Mary. I'll tell you another one, a rare one that I think that could play today, just because of his style. It was Barry Sanders. I think Barry Sanders would be a factor, but he really wasn't that long ago. So I'm actually going back before Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith. I mean, them guys were in the 90s, almost 2000, close to 2000. So, they're not that old, but I'm going back farther than that,
Yeah, I mean, Sanders retired, 98, I think? And he was obviously an absolute stud, at NCAA level, an absolute stud. But it's like you say, you go back to, like, you mentioned Notre Dame in the Fighting Leprechaun, but you think about, like, the Four Horsemen, or you talk about Bronco Nagurski or Red Grange, the footballers from the 30s and 40s, guys that were playing on the line weighing, like, 205 pounds, and it was a tackle. A tackle nowadays at 205 pounds, you're probably not seeing that at high school level.
No, you're not. Look, you got linebackers that are 6'6", 245 that are running 4.40s, legit 4.40s.
Yeah.
What's even funnier going back on that when you really stump people on that, because we had it on my boxing site. Then it goes to, well, they didn't have the balls and heart that the guys back then had. And then I got to go, okay, well, let's hold the phone. Go back, look at a picture of a guy, a 1980s linebacker or running back, and look at today's guys. They have the 1980s. They got collar pads. They got the neck rolls. They got side protectors. They got two pads in their thighs. And guys today are taking pads off. No linebackers wear a kicker's shoulder pad, just so they could be that much lighter, and they take the pads out of their pants so they could have that much more flexibility to be able to run and be a step faster in order to compete today. These guys are pretty much out there with nothing on their bodies at the size of that they are, and they're smashing each other. That's pretty ballsy to me too. So, there's a lot of things there and if nobody believes me on that, just for shits and giggles, put a picture of a 1980s middle linebacker and look at him and put today's guys.
Yeah. As you say, with the big cowboy collars.
I mean, if going off topic from you guys, but if you go back and look at John L. Sullivan was like 5'8" and 185 pounds. He'd be a light heavyweight in today's boxing. Tiny little man.
Rocky Marciano. Here's one that I may get really beat up for. Let's go, Rocky Marciano.
Small man.
Rocky Marciano might be the third ranked light heavyweight today.
Yeah.
Here was a guy 5'9". Okay, 190. Is he in most of your heavyweights today? 6'6", 6'7", 6'7", 6'9", and they're not sloppy. Anthony Joshua is built like a freaking bodybuilder, and he can fight and he's fast. Deontay Wilder, unorthodox as all hell, but probably one of the hardest punchers, and he's actually athletic for 6'7". Tyson Fury looks sloppy, but 6'9", can box the way he does. I mean, these guys are that size. I mean, go back to Muhammad Ali. I'll take shit for this. Ali was 6'3". The tallest guy I think he fought was maybe Foreman. But some of the top dangerous guys were 6'1", and Joe Frazier was 5'10" on paper. Yeah. I mentioned Frazier. Even Tyson's era. So don't get me wrong, them guys were badass. Tyson's era, do I think they could beat some of these guys today? I think guys like Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis, absolutely. But it'd be a lot tougher than what people think. Nobody wants to give credit to that. And now here's the difference. They're even talking like, should they start making another weight class for super heavyweights? But why? Yeah. These guys, they're not that different in weight. Joshua's 245, 6'6" and a half.
Yeah.
The only one Tyson Fury, he's 270 something. But so again, if people can't see it just by looking at that from that point, then I don't know how else to explain to him.
I know. I have one of my friends in Scotland, Kelly. A guy called Ross Henderson. He boxed. He was a Scotland guy at super heavyweight. He went to 2 Commonwealth Games. He was a good guy, limited by poor opposition in Scotland. But I was speaking to his coach, a guy called an old guy, really nice guy called Frank Delaney. And I was saying, how was Ross getting on? They had went to Russia for a camp to train, and he says, yeah, he's getting better now. Ross Henderson is, he was 245, 6'6.5", and quite athletic. And his coach said, his problem is he goes to these Eastern European guys, he's not big enough. It's like, what? What the fuck? These guys are, 6'9" and 160 kilos. You're like, Jesus Christ. Just enormous human beings. But one thing, I want to bring you back there now. This is always the most fun conversation. So I have an idea of who I think would be the best heavyweight of all time. Who beats everybody? The heavy, not the guy who's the best record. The guy who I think would beat every heavyweight in history. And the one that I always say is Lennox Lewis, because I think he has the size and the speed, the IQ. I think he's the one who you would say he could beat everybody. He could still beat the guys today, I believe, and he was good enough to beat the Ali, Foreman era guys as well.
I absolutely agree with you on that. And again, though, Lennox Lewis is not that far removed from where we're talking about eras. He's really not. But I forgot about the Klitschko's. But I think it would be tougher. I'm going to go back to that. Evander Holyfield, 6'2", great heavyweight. Another one that you could actually toss up there.
I think Holyfield is the most underrated heavyweight.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I don't have him underrated, but I get what you're saying as far as the perception of people in boxing.
Great fighter.
But and I know Lennox Lewis was past his prime, but if you look at when he fought Vitaly Klitschko, who was older himself too, though at that time, he struggled, and thank God for the cut, because we don't know which route that fight would have went. But that's just saying you're tapping into. So Lennox Lewis had guys, I think Riddick Bowe was 6'4", but Lennox Lewis was kind of like the tallest of his guys. I think Lennox Lewis is 6'5". They may say 6'6", but I seen him stand next to, some of them guys, and I say 6'5". But now when you're fighting, and here's the difference. So you're fighting the champion Joshua, 6'6.5". And then you go from Joshua and you go fight Deontay Wilder, 6'7". And then you got Tyson Fury, 6'9". And you just keep going that route. And then you're one of the guys on their way up right now, Eastern European and Usyk. He's kind of like your Chris Bird, 6'2" boxer. But unfortunately, Usyk is 6'4", 220, and can fight. So, that's again, with that time there with Lennox Lewis, absolutely he can still compete. And for overall what they were to do in their era, you could definitely put Lennox Lewis up there in the top 3. I have no argument with that. But again, I'm just going off. I know it's past prime Lewis, but Klitschko's, that just goes to show you, though, what that would have been like. I mean, those would be the guys on a regular basis that he would be fighting.
Yeah. I think one of the, as we opened with you, Kelly, just asking you how you got through round 2, one of the things that I would have to ask Lennox Lewis was how did he feel when he caught Vitaly with that uppercut in round 6? It was an uppercut. I don't know if you remember it. It was an uppercut that would have. I mean, it would have knocked the house down, and Vitaly took it. And it was one of those things you go, what happens when when you catch somebody with a punch like that and they don't go down? You go, fuck.
And that has nothing to do with age either, because in sports, you lose. The first thing to go is your reaction, reflexes, and speed. And the last thing is to go is your power. And I think that's, everybody knows that. And for Klitschko to be able to take that uppercut,
that's unbelievable.
That's
insane. Big guy.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the impressive things about yourself, Kelly, as well, talking about all your accomplishments we've been talking about, and again, maybe it says about boxing in general, but the fact you retired and you've never came back.
Oh,
Sorry, is that breaking up? We clear again?
you okay?
Yeah. You still hear us, Kelly?
No, I don't think he hears. No,
Well,
it's like his sound's dropped out.
Yeah, just dropped.
Okay, I got you
back.
now.
You're back.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying, Kelly, one of the most impressive things, even with all your long list of accomplishments that we've been talking about and the great fighters that you've fought and beaten, is the fact that when you retired, you've stayed retired. You've never been. Have you been tempted to come back? Because with boxing, there's always that. You always see someone that you loved growing up, and they fight on for 2 or 3 fights, or retire for a few years and then come back, and it's just heartbreaking watching it. But so far, I mean, you're 8 years retired now, and not been tempted maybe, or have you been tempted and just are you happy with where you left it?
No, absolutely. You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you retire too early, it's a shame, wasted career, even though mine was 12 years. And I hear it all the time. I have 42 pro fights. That's a lot. And if you stay around too long, you become punchy and they look down on you for that. And it's sad. For me, people don't realize this, and I just recently started saying it because I'm retired for good, and I knew when I retired, and I don't care. I like telling them how it is, and people may call me an asshole or say I'm full of shit, and I don't care. It is what it is. But when I won the world title, a lot of guys at that point, they'll be counting down the next big fight. But I always kind of wanted to get in and be financially supported and accomplish my goal, which was winning a world title. I was fortunate to win 3. So in my trophy case, no matter who wants to ever argue, I got 3 world title belts, and they can kiss my ass.
That's another
when I won the title, I started counting down to retirement. And when I hung it up, the big issue, it wasn't because of all the other shit that people were speculating. The Andre Ward, I went out to California to train with Garcia, which was great. It was an amazing time. I thought that, when I had to go out there, I was kind of pissed. I'm like, I've been pro 12 years. I got 3 world title belts. I made money. Why the hell do I got to go out here now? Usually when you up and leave your home, you go at the beginning of your career when you're trying to make it. Not at the end of your career when you're done. And but I went out there and I enjoyed it. It was a great time. I learned. But, we fought guys at the beginning like Scott Sigmund and Roel Rosinski's and guys like that. And it was just hard to keep getting up. And then the Andre Ward fight was being talked about. And I really got pumped for that one. Now, I kind of was like resurrected. And unfortunately, that's when Andre Ward got hurt. He hurt his shoulder and he had to get the surgery and he was out. So at that point, the Super 6 was still going on. So before any other meaningful fight, it had probably been another year and a half. And at that point, I retired. I was fortunate with people like my dad and the people real close to me that I had behind me to where I never had to throw a punch again. So I retired. I took 3 years off. I screwed off. I had fun. I lived my life. It is what it is. And then in 2016, I said, you know what? It's time to quit playing around and get back and get serious. So with being fortunate, I was able to go out and do pretty much what I wanted to do. I went and bought me a gym. I started a podcast. I did numerous other investments, and it was fun. And I opened a fitness gym. And now I'm in the process of opening another fitness gym and doing a boxing gym and many other things. So, yeah, I mean, boxing was never – I toyed around with the idea on Joe Rogan, and that took off a lot farther than I expected it. But to say did I ever have the itch in these 8 years? Yeah. But, that itch could have been just going to the gym and hitting the bag or the pads for 2 rounds. I mean, I did a powerlifting meet back in 2017 because that's what I kind of fell into was powerlifting. I'm 255 now. I'm far from 160, and and I had it. But at this time in 2017, I was at 232, and I had to get down to 220. And I told my coach, my powerlifting coach, I was like, "Screw you if you think I'm even losing 12 pounds." I go, "I'm done with that." I was like, "The only way you're gonna catch me running is if there's a fire or a dog behind me." And But I got down to 220 because he said I couldn't do it, and I laughed. He said I couldn't do it in 5 days, and that was cake. But so I've been having fun. I mean, I had the itch, but it's not to anything. I don't want to. I like eating. I like eating what I want to eat. I like being able to go. My gym. I go there. I'm involved with kids. I train a couple of kids on boxing in the back room, even though it's not a boxing gym, but it's not a job. So I go. I come and go as I want, and that's where I'm at. I mean, I work my ass off to be able to do that, and
So one of the things that I always say to people is, when you get guys like you, Kelly, who put the work in, who had damaged your career, worked your ass off, made that weight, starved yourself. When you get to this stage in your career, you can do whatever the fuck you want.
That's right. You know what I mean?
You can do what you want at this stage in your life. You've done the work.
I wasn't fortunate to hit the lottery and make the money that I did. I mean, you want to talk about blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, that was it. So to me, I appreciate, who said it very well. And actually, I had the honor of going to the Atlantic City Boxing Hall of Fame. And I'm going to tell you a guy who I fought, who's just, sometimes when he says shit, you got to take it in. And that is Bernard Hopkins. And like he said, he goes, no matter what people may think of you or say about you, he goes, but what you did and he didn't say it to me personally, but what you accomplished, they can't take that away. And that's what it is. And what you did to have to go through it and get that, he goes, know your worth, know what you're worth. And that's not just material like money, but that's also like your accomplishments, what you did. And that's what he's saying. So, and that's kind of how I am. I mean, I'm not cocky. I'm not arrogant. I've always been humble, and I like being humble. But I also know my worth, and I could do anything I want to do pretty much right now within reason. And that's where I'm enjoying it. That's where like my hard work paid off. And I'm glad to get out of the sport when I did, because as of right now, I feel like I got my wits and everything's there. And I'm able to spend time with my kids and things like that. And I've been happy. It's people will say shit, they'll accusations, this, that. I mean, for Youngstown, I'm like the world's most interesting man. I've done everything right, and I'm like the biggest drunk and everything else. I'd be cool over in your guys' home country, but not here. And did I like to have fun? Fuck yeah, I did. And that's how I am. But it's kind of funny that I'm all these things, and yet I'm still able to never have to go throw another punch again in my life, and I could go into my own gym, my own business, and when I want to, and just be able to enjoy everything that I want to, and have a podcast where I'm able to go to these big fights and pay for the equipment, the studio time, PR woman, producer, and everything else, and think about opening another gym. You don't do that when you're a drunk, addict, derelict. You can't do those things. You know what I mean? You can't. So it just goes to show how that works, and that's my little vent on that part of it. But that all came cool with the retirement thing. Like when you asked about getting the itch and why I died, because most of the time the familiar question along, you retire too early, this, that, blah, blah, blah. I usually get hit with those, and so I just kind of I don't think you guys would have done it. It's been a great interview, but kind of beat everybody to the punch on that now when I get asked that question. So,
I get it. That's just what I want to say.
I'll also say, Kelly, if you ever want to come to Scotland for a drink, you're welcome. I've got a spare room. You can stay with me and we'll have a few pints.
Yeah. I bet you I'd be a blast, too.
I
think I have a lot of fans. I get it still to this day. You guys would be surprised how many from the UK, how many autographs and things like that. I think it's awesome. I enjoy that. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool. So
we have to tell you, Kelly, when me and Chris put this podcast, when we started doing the podcast way back, like we've only been doing this for like 3.5, 4 months now. We kind of started it during lockdown because we were bored, and we spoke to some really interesting people, some cool people. And Chris said, do you think we could get Kelly Pavlik? And I was like, well, what's the worst that happens? He says no. or he ignores the message, or doesn't see the message, or whatever. It's no skin. The other option is we get to talk to Kelly fucking Pavlik. Do you know what I mean? The whole way through, when we've been messaging you, or when I've been messaging you this week to set it up, there was this little part of my brain going, are we about to be catfished? That when we add you in on Skype, it's going to be some fat old white guy just jerking off. There was that. Do you know what I mean? They were like, surely it can't be Kelly Pavlik talking to two idiots from Scotland. It must be. It has to be something wrong. So it's been.
No, that's cool, man. I've been having a blast. That's funny you say that about getting catfish. You know, I caught the message on Instagram kind of by accident because I'm going to explain to you. I got some fucked up friends on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm afraid to open my inboxes and shit like that because God only knows what I'm going to get in one of those. So, I mean, sometimes I kind of like, and I got a fucked up sense of humor. And, but yeah, I get some crazy stuff.
I can imagine.
We could get into the fucked up sense of humor if we speak to you again at some point, Kelly. I'll say we're talking on with time. So one thing that I want to finish on, I think, is a cool place to finish. So when you go to fight the rematch with Jermaine Taylor, and you've got the world famous, the most famous MC in the entire world, introducing you as Youngstown's own WBC, WBO, Ring Magazine, Lineal champion of the world. And he comes out, Kelly the Ghost Pavlik. How does that feel?
I wish I could sit there and say that I was able to have like an outer body experience and watch it. You know what I mean? Because at that point, man, and that's a good question. You know who it is. You know the magnitude of the fight. You know the electricity in the air. But you're also nervous and kind of like on the inside, shaking like a dog shitting razor blades. You're nervous. You know what I mean? And so like you're paying attention to it, but you're not fully. It don't set in at that point in time. You're not like, holy crap, this is the guy, building me up. And but it is cool. I mean, after the fight, when everything's calmed down and said and done, yeah, you realize it, and it's an honor. And I believe a lot of these things from my career, I'm really starting to appreciate now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And, the world title belts, I go and I walk past them and it's kind of like, wow, those are mine. Mm-hmm. The first couple of years, you knew you're the champ, but you don't know you're the champ. And especially you're still fairly young. I mean, I'm still fairly young now, but at the time, you're mid-20s, you're full of testosterone, you're full of cockiness, and you're, especially being a champ, that's kind of the worst thing at that age to be. And, you don't let that stuff kind of settle in and until like you get a little older and everything's slowed down and all this crazy is done. Then you start realizing what you have done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Right. Well, we won't keep you too much. I think that's that's about an hour and 20 minutes. I think we've done so. We won't. Sorry?
Just before we drop out, Kelly, if people are looking to find out a bit more about you, find you on social media, where can they find you? And we'll add this into the notes on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm Kelly Pavlik on Facebook. My Instagram is pavlik.kelly. What else? They can catch my podcast, The Punchline, with Kelly Pavlik and James Dominguez on Facebook Live and YouTube. Or you can go to punchline.live and pick up all of our old shows. We have not done any. We'll probably be starting up in about 2 weeks. This quarantine, I take it kind of serious, and but there's a lot of things going on. So that's pretty much how to get a hold of me.
Awesome.
Or find out what's going on.
Well, thank you again so much for your time, Kelly. It was a pleasure. Hopefully, maybe if we're still doing this for 6 months or a year down the line, we'll reach out and we'll speak to you again.
I hope so, man. I had a blast. I thought this was pretty damn cool, man. I appreciate it. So.
Awesome. That means a lot.
2020 is broken when Kelly Pavlik's saying stuff like that to us. We've clearly broken.
Hey, yeah, right. Something got to be fucking go decent in 2020, though, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's been awesome, man. I'm really happy.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, have a good one, man.
You too. Episode 28 in the can. Kelly Pavlik. Thank you very much.
No problem, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Later.
The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.